Um, I've come to many start-out events, and they're worthwhile. So if this is your first one, I encourage you to keep coming. Galvanize and 500 Startups deserve special recognition because they're supporting LGBT entrepreneurs in a very special way, and that's kind of neat and interesting. And I encourage all of you to check them out if you're a new entrepreneur or you've been around. It's not rare, but they're big players to be doing this. So tonight I'm going to do a couple of things, but I want to see who is in the room so I can kind of tell the jokes that you guys might laugh at. How many people work on apps? Okay, less than half. How many people are entrepreneurs? How many people came because they have my app? Awesome. Hornet launched in October 2011, and it was started by 3 gay guys. And I was single at the time, and neither of the other 2 founders were. But I hated my competitor, whose name I will not name, because I used it. And I just thought that there could be someone else in the space doing something a little bit different. And so I went with my friends, and this might sound a little bit arrogant, but we tried to buy Grindr. And then we thought that was expensive, but this was in 2011, so no one bought apps back then. And no one bought gay apps back then. So the price seemed unreasonable, and I said, yeah, we can just build this. And so we raised just a little bit of money, $500,000 from a group of angels. And then we built this app. And we started to market it. And all of a sudden, we were driving down the runway of, you have employees, you're building a technology product, and then you have a launch date. So I'm going to share some of the struggles, because if you're an entrepreneur in the room, you might appreciate these. Maybe there's something you can learn. If not, grill me later, and I'll do my best. So we get towards when we're going to launch, which was in October. And our app is kind of where we want. We're building all these features that we thought the competitor didn't have, and we really thought the community would want, or at least I wanted them. I wanted to be able to explore other cities. I wanted to be able to block a lot of users. There was just a lot of wish lists that I had. And so we get to the launch date. The technology team was kind of like, it's kind of ready to go. And we could have pushed the launch date back, but at the time, I was responsible for marketing. So we had a small marketing budget. It was $100,000, and I had all these events planned. So it was it was 20% of our budget, and we were going to just blow the doors off of everyone. So we launched in a bunch of cities on the East Coast, the Midwest, just Seattle, everywhere. And so, New York starts a few hours ahead of us. So we launched this thing in New York. And at the time, we were beta testing with like 80 of my friends. And the app worked just fine. So we launched in New York. It's 9 o'clock there. 1,000 people download my app. And we were not built to scale. So my tech team is having a panic attack. They're trying to fix things. They're just pulling their hair out. And then I live in San Francisco, so I'm showing up at Q-Bar, which is where we had our launch event here, and with an app that didn't work. It just had my logo. I'm telling people why they needed to download this and use it. And people are really unforgiving in the app world. I mean, people were a little more forgiving back in 2011, but gosh, if you're starting a new app now, you better make sure you have your bugs worked out. So one of the big deciding things that you have when you're launching something like an app is this idea of runway. So you build something and you're getting to where you've got a burn rate, and you either got to bring it to market or not take it to market. And despite this terrible launch, I think there's always something better about getting it to market sooner. So make your app smaller, release it, see if people like it. And because one of the things, especially when you work with a broad team, you know, I have designers, I have front-end coders, the people who build the thing that you see on your phone, and then there's the back-end guys. All of them want it perfect, and that just costs money. And so you could build something that's really amazing, or you can run out of money. Or those things are the same thing. So the sooner you build something imperfect and get it to market, I think that's really prudent advice. Just gonna I had a couple things I wanted to share with you about our company. So we're at 3 million users. We have 20% month-over-month growth. We didn't do that because it was easy. In fact, we raised $500,000. We raise money all the time. We just keep raising money. And one of the secrets to success, I actually think, is having deep pockets. And our pockets are not very deep, and so they run out. But one of the things that leads to success is having staying power. So thinking about your budget, thinking about how you're going to keep making it. They're great to know ahead of time, but really what you need to make sure that you're in a position to do is to do something different as soon as you've done what you thought you were going to do. So we raised $500,000. We thought that was going to be enough, but luckily I had enough smart people around me who had us in a position where we could keep raising money. So how you plan your cap table and things like that are truly important. And if you're either a tech person or you're an artist or you didn't get an MBA, you've got to get some good solid advice. So start out can be a network to help you accomplish this. And I think it might be more interesting. I haven't told my jokes yet, but I'm going to save them because I think they're going to come out in the questions. So I might just turn it over to questions and give really long answers. So I can moderate. Do you want me to moderate this? Okay, awesome. Robin.
Deep pockets, the point that you decided to monetize, how did you know that was the right time to do it? And how did you know where to start with that?
That's a great question. I had no money left. I had absolutely no money left. I had written checks, and we had no money left. We were ready to turn the lights off. And so I had like just pennies left in the bank. And so that was enough to pay the developers to build our first monetization features. And then that kept us going and could convince some more people to invest because people bought these things that we said that they would buy. So it was the turn the lights off point. So that was in like month 14. We had hit 1 million users. We had strong growth. And at that point, it was really, the founders just got together and just said, we've worked 120%, we're going to work 140%.
So open for questions now. Whoever has one, we have a mic. All right, I'm going to pass it to you.
Can you talk a little bit about marketing? In the beginning, you said it was about 20% of your budget, and you've gone from 1,000 users in market to 3 million today. Depending on what you feel comfortable with, how do you grow that user base, and are you still looking at a lot of your budget put towards marketing?
Sure. So when we launched, I had a $100,000 budget. I spent $80,000 in 1 month, and that was because I was building a social network, and I thought I needed a tipping point. And at the time, I thought that could be done easily, like maybe 100 active users per city, and just based on the app, if you're kind of familiar with how it works, I thought that would be enough. And that proved to be somewhat true. The real thing was those first users, the acquisition cost was absolutely insane. So like sometimes I would spend $5,000 on an event and 40 people would download my app. And now our acquisition costs are like 4 cents or something. So we don't spend really anything on marketing now. Once in a while we do some kind of experiment or we get free things. But if I had to rely on buying users, it just wouldn't be a viable business. So because it was a social network, I had to get enough users to populate my community, but enough of them like it that they tell their friends. And so that's truly important because, the lifetime value per customer of mine isn't thousands of dollars, we're talking dollars. So having a low acquisition cost is really high. And so we have some viral features that users use, but really word of mouth's the most important thing at this point.
That was actually my question, but I have one more. So you were saying that you wanted to build an app that has more working? You want more features, right? But users don't care about the features. Like, I don't care. A Grindr, Hornet, Tinder, whatever it is, right? I just want to either hook up or meet somebody nice, right? How are you different from all others, and what's your positioning, and how did it help you to get where you are, like to get 3 million users?
Yeah, so we've had this thesis since the beginning. We haven't done a pivot yet, so it's hard to say if something's works better. But what we positioned ourselves is something that's a little less sleazy than our competitors. So that was how we marketed ourselves. 95% of our profiles have face pictures. I think this is a technology answer. This isn't just a community culture answer. We have more pictures, so people are more inclined to upload their face picture first, where my competitors, you have to put your best asset forward. And because you have one picture. So I think that creates a different tone. My users are really chatty. I mean, people will chat for a long, long time. So I think there's a mood difference to our app. Some people are in the mood to connect. And I might be a little bit older than you, but when I first was in the online gay world, it wasn't Grindr, it was gay.com. That was where people chatted. And it was really a meaningful thing. And so I missed that because gay.com's trying to come back, but at the time they had evaporated. Their company had gone bankrupt, and there was just Grindr, and I just wanted to meet people beyond just that. And online's really neat because you can filter out people based on your interests, whether that's a sexual interest or that's like, I want to meet someone who's into opera music, or I want to meet someone who's into ultra marathons. You can find that out before you meet them. So I just wanted something that wasn't about the right now. Like filter for ultra marathons? That might be a little bit specific, but there's more filters coming.
I've got a question, and it's Chris. So having started a couple of LGBT, or businesses focused on the LGBT market, what I found to be difficult is the raise, because there's an immediate perception that because you're not addressing the entire consumer market, that you're only going to get it 10%, right? So how big can you really get in terms of scale, right? So how did you manage how have you dealt with that? Did you have that issue? How did you overcome that? And there's really two things. One is some investors are just like, I don't want to invest in a gay business, ew. And then the second is I don't want to invest in a business for the gay community because it's going to be too small. Mm-hmm. They don't see it as a vertical market that's valid. And by the way, if you see some of these flyers on your chairs, it's Mr. B&B, it's a gay Airbnb, one of the businesses I'm doing right now. Okay.
That's a brilliant question. I was hoping that would come up. So I don't think that's true at all. I think if you look at some of the most profitable businesses, they're gay businesses. And I think if you look at media, that's true. I think if you look at a company like my company, our ARPU's higher than others. So like, if you look at a straight dating competitor, like their user acquisition costs are $30. Mine are 13 cents. So my pitch to my investors is, look, this is what you want to be buying. And there's these old ideas on the LGBT community on why it's a great space to invest in. But I would tell you, users in the gay space are just so sticky. We have a natural niche. I mean, there's a technology term that was, like if you look at articles on, say, Queerty or .429, when people read those articles, they're very likely to read another article on that page. People who read the New York Times because you posted a story on Facebook, they are just reading enough to see if they want to repost it. They're not going to another New York Times article, and there's tons of data around this. We didn't have that pitch. I mean, we got, this last round, we had endless straight people trying to invest in Hornet, and we had no space for them. So I think that could be a frame of mind, but I think, this is what this room is all about. We have this also this story around raising money, but I'm sure there's plenty of gay businesses that people can start where that's less of a need.
So you told us about like getting to your 500,000 and whatever, but can you tell us about how you got your first check? Like how did that work out, or where were you in development, and just give us the background of how you got your first investment.
It's not a helpful story. I was with my 3 friends, and we were going to buy Grindr, and they said, "Are you going to write a check?" And I was like, "If I have to." And then we didn't buy them, and they're like, "We still want that check." But then the rest of I didn't give this advice. I meant to give this advice at the start of my talk. So we were going to build our own app, and we had a big network of people we could ask. And so my advice to you today is, I know for a fact there's really interesting people in this room. I see some VCs I know. I see some really brilliant, I see the guy who is the revenue guru at Zynga, he's in the room. My super famous CFO, Ann Dorman's in the room. And so meet everyone before you leave. You're crazy to come here and then to not meet everyone. And that makes life so much easier. One of my biggest competitors, or he's not my biggest competitors, we think of each other as peers, but .429, Richard Klein, he's my dearest and bestest friend in the city. And we're in a very, very similar space. So don't be afraid to meet people. The tech community is so wonderful and encouraging and giving.
One in the back.
Hey, so I have a question. So when I started my first tech company at 21, and we reached like astronomical scale, like pretty off the bat. We launched an app for Facebook called Bandpage, and we hit 31 million monthly active users within months. And so we raised, within our first year, $22 million. When Facebook ended up changing the page structure, we lost over 90% of our MAU, and pretty much after that, the investors pretty much were like, okay, we're doing, like, everyone out, like, we're doing our thing now. And so I left that company, and I started my own company, and for the last 2 years, we've been bootstrapping. We haven't taken any money. We haven't looked to raise any money. And we've been okay, and we've been surviving on no revenue. I mean, enough revenue just to kind of get going. At what point do you think it's time to be like, okay, it's time to go for it, it's time to raise money? Or is it better to just keep on bootstrapping and keep all the equity within the family?
So my opinion is bootstrapping is just painful and terrible, and I hate doing it. So I would tell you not to do it, but you only get one pitch with these people generally. Some people are nice enough to keep inviting you back, but I would tell you when you're go do some practice ones, find some VCs where you can say, hey, I just want to talk to you about this, and see if they think that you're ready. I don't know enough about your venture in particular, but a lot of people are willing to do that. Startout can probably connect you with some people as well. But as soon as you can raise money, I would tell you to do it, because the most painful thing is waiting to do something that you really want to do. And I've been there. I've been there when we had 3 tech guys versus 11 guys. It's just, there's so much you want to do.
Oh, whoa. All right. We'll just start from the back.
I had a question about hiring. So it were you 3, right, at the very beginning? Were you looking to bring gay men, members of LGBT community to your startup, or was it just everybody?
We tried to hire the best talent we could. And sometimes that was gay people, sometimes that was people overseas. In my space, it's so easy to hire people remotely. So my CTO lives in Cape Town, and he was an amazing addition. And we couldn't hire anyone here as good as him, even if we paid them $300,000. I think having the right people on your team is always absolutely critical. And there's a lot of product features that need a lot of gay people, but a lot of the founders were power users of our app, so we have a lot of product feedback.
Hi, Sean. So I just wonder, is there one feature at Hornet that if every app in the world should have, that Hornet has discovered? What is that feature? And secondly, my other question is this is an easier question, what's the footprint of Hornet? So are you just California-based or, US-based? Where are you footprinted?
So I think the feature that gave us our quickest rise was the know your status feature. I mean, that got us press fan, that got us users liking our app. So if you don't have Hornet, we had this feature, it still exists, know your status. You can put when you took your HIV test, and it reminds you to get tested again. And in some places in the world, it does really neat things. So like in Manila, we organized a way where you could schedule your test appointment through the app. And this was a big deal in a country like that, because there's very few places to get tested, because your family doctor goes to church with you. It's a highly Catholic country. And so there were a lot of people who liked our app because we had this do good focus, and that was just the position of the founders, and people thought we were crazy when we said we were going to do that. And that made us really famous. A lot of things have evolved in HIV prevention, and I think there's a lot more for us to do there, where there's things that we could be doing that are even more meaningful around stigma and some other education, which we plan to do. But in an app like ours, if I had to say what's the most important thing, it's chat. Making sure chat works. That has given us miles and miles and miles of user fanfare. When one of our other apps have had some kind of competitor apps had some challenge, or in some part of the world where it just didn't work right. So knowing that your messages got delivered, and people just had this idea that wasn't happening on the other apps for whatever reason. And then our footprint, we're doing really well. 3 million users, 1 million active monthly users, nearly the same daily and weekly users, which is kind of a unique thing to have happen, and really strong growth, 20% month over month. So in some countries, we've already moved to #1 spot. So in France, Russia, Brazil, Taiwan, Thailand, the Philippines, Turkey, we've displaced our competitors, and there's quite a few countries where we've moved into number 2, and the rest we have strong growth. So I'm excited about the gay tech space because the smartphone revolution is still starting. It hasn't even fully happened. And so if you think about young people coming out earlier and earlier and people having more smartphones, and then people like my parents' age who have smartphones, like the market's just so I don't think we're saturating anytime soon.
I think
How did you manage the rollout to different countries? And then since it's been in other countries, do you find that the culture in the community varies depending on where you are? How does the experience change?
Yeah, so great question. I didn't have any marketing money left, so I didn't do any single events overseas. We just turned it on, and it worked. And then cultural differences, there are some cultural differences, some places people are more down to business, but I think a neat thing to add to that question is there's different security things we do to protect our users overseas that are a little bit different here. So we skew people's locations a little bit more than we do here, where if I skew your location here too much, you're like, Sean's right next to me. It says he's so far away. And so I have mixed feelings about having to do that because I think that's almost like a homophobic response, but there's just realities in the world that we do that in.
Hi, Sean. I had a little story and also a question. So the story is, this morning before I look at my calendar knowing I was going to see you here today, I happened to see a post from a friend of mine who lives in Moscow. And let me just get it here for you so I can relate it to you, but I had it here a minute ago. This is a 23-year-old New Yorican who speaks like 6 languages, and he's living in Moscow now because he's learning Russian, and I think he's eventually going to work for the CIA. But so he posts this morning. He says, literally just confirmed a new appointment time with my doctor at a Russian clinic, first time ever at a Russian clinic, by the way, he happens to call this a gay hookup app. He says, I sent him a wink in the waiting room, not knowing it was him. Then, after the appointment, he replied on Hornet, which he puts in parentheses, European version of Grindr. So this is just feedback from a user, how it's perceived anyway. That he had a scheduling conflict, so we agreed to meet later in the day. He then proceeded to insist I speak to him in the formal version of you in Russia, so he's studying languages. So then he says, Russia is the land of opportunities. So anyway, thought you might be interested in that. Question, what's the end game for Hornet? Do you get, bought up by Match.com or Zeus after it goes public or something like that? Or do you think this company winds up becoming something part of a larger, some other kind of, sector maybe other than the sort of, more typical adjacent properties?
Yeah, great question. So I think I don't think Match is the best match for us because they don't pay enough for companies they buy. So I just can't imagine that would make sense for us. So there's an idea of a roll-up. So that would mean that you would take our very niche-focused company and combine it with some other company to make that company like a better proposition and get a bigger valuation for both of us. But we're a company that makes money. So I think the future is bright for us as we are. And I don't think we need to expand into other things or change our product. We're growing so quickly, and I think I think that's the course that we're plotting. So we're assuming that we're going to make enough money to make our investors happy. I think that's a great proposition when you get to say that and believe that, because sometimes you race towards user acquisitions with this hope that then that makes you so valuable that someone buys you, but then you run the risk of running out of money, because if you're not making money off your users, they're costing you money. So that's our plan, is to keep making more valuable features that make our social network valuable for people and doing innovative ways around monetization.
So it sounds like you have a number of employees around the world. I'm just curious to hear about how you went about hiring them and evaluating them from a distance.
Yeah, so I have this advice from before starting Hornet. I always hire people I worked with or have worked with someone else I know. It's just so much easier to get comfortable with someone and knowing what their traits are and how best to use their talents, because a lot of times it takes you 6 months to figure out that, this person does not like to wake up, do not schedule morning meetings, or you're going to ruin his day and he's not going to be productive. So, and it's just easier to know someone's talent base. So when you're a little teeny company, that's even more possible. So, but if I was hiring executives somewhere else, I mean, I would hopefully have another way of knowing them.
Hi, you mentioned that you were highly ranked in foreign countries like France, and I was wondering what your growth rate is in the US.
Yeah, so it's similar worldwide, so 20% is our average, and that number's a little bit higher in the US. Some markets, maybe we hit some kind of saturation earlier, and then some countries we just don't have any growth in. Luckily, those aren't major markets I'm too worried about, but I'm excited about moving into a higher ranking in the U.S.
Hi, my question is, as a co-founder of a startup, what has your experience taught you about leadership?
Be more specific.
Like, is there anything you've learned as a co-founder to more effectively marshal your employees to accomplish your goals?
So I'm a really nice manager, and in tech, that seems to go over well because they've not always had this. Sometimes I worry I'm too nice, but it seems to keep them from wanting to go get a job somewhere else. So.
Hi. My question is about the timing of the pitch. You may have already said this, but when you started, did you get the money and then actually start, or did you pitch with a concept? And can you pitch with a concept, or do you have to prove it in the market before you can pitch?
A great question, especially people working on apps and things like that. So, this was early 2011 when I was pitching. And I built a prototype, and we had some checks that came in before we had a working prototype. It was just like a cartoon. But I've had lots of friends, some in the room, who've just gone through it. Sometimes your investors will say they want to see some market proof, but sometimes you just, if you can't write those checks yourself, you gotta find something. So maybe you can find some silly angels who will invest. Is my.
I have two questions for you. The first is, you talked about you spent a lot of money on events. What was the one that you think was the most successful? What led to the highest profile out of it? The second question is a legal question. We've seen that Uber has been sued by people where their drivers, even not when on duty, have run people over. And I just wonder how apps like yours protect themselves from being sued in case something happens, someone underage gets on and something happens?
So around the events, what was most successful? I mean, most successful in terms of cheaper user acquisition, or more successful in terms of getting users? I mean, like we bought all these tank tops for people, and it was like $8 per tank top. And then when you put in the event cost, it was like $40 to $80 per user acquisition. So that wasn't a high user acquisition. So the best event was when there were some people who were, I forgot what Malcolm Gladwell called these people, but they were like the influencers. And I had one guy who won me like 400 users. So I've tried repeatedly to reproduce that. So this one person was by far the best. And all my efforts to try, like, to follow Tipping Point and to identify influencers has been just kind of a waste of time. But if you ask the one cheapest thing, it was this one influencer. The best things I did that you could pay for was to give away really cool stuff that people wanted. And then around the legal issue, it's a really big deal. It's a big deal for us for a different reason than you might expect. In gay social networks, there's actually entrapment. So police going on there and using the app to get users into trouble. And so one of the ways we prevent this is we do not allow users who are under 18. So that makes my app less of a target for police to want to use it for that way. So when someone's, and then we have a whole reporting system. So this makes my customer service quite high, but if users are reported as underage, the only way that they can get back on is if they show their ID. And the reason we decided to go this route was partly to protect those underage users, but also to protect our adult users who might, unbeknownst to themselves, get into trouble. So, and then we use lawyers to draft our terms of service and stuff like that. But we try hard just because the penalties can be so high. So, and then in countries where it's not so much about a law issue, it's just about people's safety, we do a lot of proactive communication. In fact, just in the Arab world today, I sent out some technology blast from the Electronic Freedom Frontier, EFF, around how to stay safe, how LGBT people can stay safe on apps like mine and Twitter and Facebook and things like that, because you know there's the social scale search on Facebook now, and they're using that in some countries to target people.
Anybody else? Oh, all right.
So what are the top 3 things, if you have a chance to do it over with Hornet, will you do it?
Gosh, I think we just got really lucky, to be honest. I think we timed it right. Our competitors had problems when we came out. I mean, that was huge for us. And so those things, I mean, that really outweighs me trying to do something over again. It would have been nice if I had a little bit more money and if I had launched the product and then did the marketing a little bit later. So if we had scaled it and tested it a little bit larger, but I mean, there were a lot of other things that went into that. So I think in the app space now, you can't really have bugs, especially in my space, which is hyper competitive. So I can answer that question probably the least well.
I think I saw. Was there one over here? No. Oh. Oh.
Yeah, Sean. So kind of a follow-up to the question about the end game. Now that you have a technology platform, have you thought about launching kind of other, like Scruff-like applications or something?
Yeah, absolutely. We looked at this so many different ways: joint ventures, buying things, white labeling us. It's just the gay space is so profitable for us that it's hard for me to think that other things make sense compared to us focusing on being number one. So I think the chance of payouts is just so much higher for us to focus on winning the gay market. I think there's some other possibilities, but you know, we're gonna stay focused.
All right, we have one more, and then is there anybody else after this? Otherwise, I think this might be our last one, maybe.
What is your revenue target, like 3 to 5 years from now, and how are you going to achieve it? I mean, you have to pitch to investors, right? What kind of targets are you targeting?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the space is hyper profitable space. So I would look to my competitors like Scout and OkCupid and simply just try to outpace them, because I think gays are bigger spenders, they're more prolific, and the retention of those consumers are just so much higher than in the straight space. So maybe that's a 2-time multiple of what the ARPU on a straight dating app is.
And what are they at? Like, what are the top ones making the most money?
Yeah, so I think if you look at something like Scout, you know, they're able to inch out something like $15 to $20. So I think the potential for us is much brighter. But if you look at our app today, really we have a completely different model of how we charge users. So if you look, this is probably a more insightful answer. If you look at a lot of apps, dating sites, they create these paywalls. And for something that's a social app, that's not necessarily what you want to do, especially if you believe in growth, because you're preventing people from using your app. So if you compare us to Grindr or Scruff, they have this wall where you see only so many profiles. You know, in Grindr, the paid version's 300, the free version is 100 profiles that you can see. We'll let you scroll until your phone crashes. I mean, you just can keep going, because for the paying users, I think that's a better experience for you, a non-paying user, to discover them and flirt back. I mean, how sucky is it for you to be a paying member and then you're always the one messaging someone else? So we're running something quite different, and we're going to stay with that thesis for a long time, because I think it takes a long time to prove that. So there could be a lot of people pressuring us to pivot and to squeeze out that money earlier, but I think this will ultimately have the highest return and a higher growth rate.
Thank you.
All right, so anybody else? Otherwise, I think that's probably the last one. Oh, all right, one more. How many of you had? Like 5? Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I was just wondering, at the very beginning, you mentioned you were single when you just launched Hornet. Let's test the efficiency of the app. Let's test the efficiency of the app. Have you found a boyfriend on Hornet or not?
I found 2 boyfriends from Hornet in the short time of launching it. Yeah, it's a funny story. I have 2 funny stories I'll finish with. When we were localizing our app, I wanted to see if our Portuguese that we were using in Brazil was correct. And so we have an Explore feature, so you can travel to Rio and talk to people there in the app without going there. And so there was someone, and I was like talking to just every single person who had English in their profile. And this person didn't have English, but they were cute, so I said hello. And he turned out to be from San Francisco. And then he came back, and we dated for 2 years. So that's one funny story. And then the other story I will tell you, this is, if you ever meet someone and they're the founder of an app, and you want to date with them, the best pickup line you can use is, oh, I know that app. I have it. In fact, I gave you 5 stars. So with that said, before you all leave, download my app, give me 5 stars, and write a nice review.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here, Sean. So we're going to have drinks and stuff for the next 15 to 20 minutes in that room back over there that we were just in. And we're going to have another event next month, which we will be announcing within the next week, and it'll be in the same space. So thank you for coming, everybody, and thank you to Galvanize for offering this amazing space, and to Start Out for helping organize, and to Sean, of course, for being here. Thank you so much, Sean.